And welcome back. As you all begin to look about, you can see signs of recently abandoned rituals. You could see remnants of magical incantations that have been abandoned. And within that space, as you're all glancing around, you, Orym, looked up and amongst the ceiling shadow saw a face. You see this kind of shadowed expression of a smile that vanishes into the shadow of the ceiling.
Someone's up there.
You are intruders within my domain.
As that happens, the shadow seems to drip in a massive, slow column. And from the tip of it, as it descends, you see that face emerge from it, grinning, smiling, pale gray, pointed, sallow, pulled tight against bone, if there was any.
Orym points his seedling at the pillar. The Hierophant in there?
The Hierophant is in me. Come here.
No.
They drip slower from the ceiling.
We're like names.
Then leave.
Turns its head, its eyes narrow. Like pulls back upwards and it kind of vanishes into the shadow. And a moment later you watch it plop down on top of the risen platform where the green crystal kind of emanates the dull, energetic green glow within the top of the chamber. As it spills out, you see shadow curl outward and then kind of drift off as it reforms back up into this kind of looming, almost like an oval-like torso that then slowly takes shape into an elongated form, the head kind of peering out on top. And you hear this kind of slight crackle of stone on stone. As you kind of look back, you can see some of the roots that grow through the stone here are starting to form up to create a barrier behind you. All right. So, to that point, Orym, you're up with Prism on deck.
All right, lightning quick, Orym will crouch down with the boots and spring across this gap. And from that spot, I'm just gonna whip out a dagger, and see what it does to see what we're dealing with.
That's a thing.
It just vanishes, and you see it kind of like twitch ever so faintly. So it definitely felt an impact, but minimal. At the end of your turn, it's going to go ahead and use a shadow spear on you as you move.
Okay.
As it strikes you, you manage to pull away as it vanishes into the ground, and there's a little bit of an existing kind of almost black metallic spear stuck there, like it was trying to pierce and pin you.
Wow.
All right, so Bor'Dor, you're up.
I'm gonna pull out my crossbow and cast just a lightning bolt.
Okay. 13 points of lightning damage as it strikes through, but you see it almost seems to form away from it. It doesn't seem to take the full brunt of the electrical energy from your lightning bolt. Alrighty. It is now the entity's turn. As Evithorir, up top, begins to shift the face upward. It grows strangely thin and tall, like it's almost mimicking the shape of the spire behind it. And from within, you see these kind of thick, meaty black hands that don't match the somewhat thin feel of its form. As it reaches out as it does, its fingers curl upward and the ground around you begins to shake, and dull green necrotic power seems to seep up from it around you. Glyphs appear and glow on the ground, and all of you suddenly are surrounded by an extremely intense, freezing, screaming burst of necrotic power. 28 points of necrotic damage.
Ooh.
28 points of necrotic damage.
10.
28 points of necrotic damage.
22.
You take 14 points of necrotic damage.
24.
14 points of necrotic damage.
21.
14 points of necrotic damage. And as you kind of almost fall to your knees, the breath pulled out of you, you have to catch yourself again as a bit of your life force itself is swallowed and snuffed. With that, this red sphere kind of fires out of the shadow and then forms this glowing red orb in the vicinity. Both Ashton and Bor'Dor, you feel like all the color in the room goes to just black and white. That brings us to Laudna's go.
I'm gonna cast darkness on the little red orb.
Okay. Now, what you saw the
Darkened
black
orb.
glowing becomes this 10-foot radius, just globe of black, lightless space. So now it's just this dome of darkness around it. And that brings us to Ashton's go with Denise on deck.
I'm gonna head nicely down that little thing and take a nice swipe right there.
You go to swing wide, and as your hammer goes through the air, it hits just the edge of the shadow, and just like hitting a shadow, makes purchase on nothing. Orym, you're up with Prism on deck.
Okay, Mother, stay with me. We're moving. And I start booking it. Just cannonball through the air and land on the ground. Right behind it.
Behind it, you got it. No issue landing.
Action surge.
So as you strike through twice, between the impact of your mild hammer hit through and your double strike, there is some resistance within the shadow, and then you're hitting something thick within.
Hey!
As the blow comes through, you watch as the shadow dissipates, and for a brief second, you see like a shoulder and a face of a person inside the shadow.
Who is it?
So it's the Hierophant.
Hierophant,
Hevestro is
yeah.
in it, like it said.
So the finishing of Orym's turn. Prism, you're up.
Yeah. I'm gonna use my little spell book to do a chromatic orb that is force.
As the orb explodes on the outside, you watch the shadow just pushed away, almost like it's stretching it like a tar before it snaps back. And for a brief moment, you see an elven figure that's partially obscured by within that looks kind of shriveled a bit, pale, and seems to like take the impact as well before the shadow sweeps back over it. Finishing your go, that brings us to the entity's turn. It's going to go ahead and fire another shadow spear at you. Cool. You just dodge out of the way, and it hits the wall, and you see where this like black, almost iron sphere digs deep into it, and the black shadow just still surrounds it, and it begins to just dissipate at the tip, but still hold its physical form there for a time. It's going to like shift around you.
I'm going to hit it with orbital decay.
As it's trying to move away, you watch the shadows almost being pulled towards Ashton. It's like, and as it pulls away, the jaw of the exposed face opens up as it turns slightly askew to the side, and as it does, this pure green noxious fume
Wait, is this
counterspell?
Yes!
Suddenly you watch as the heavy fume just seems to dissipate into a fine mist and just kind of join the moisture in the air around.
What interesting tricks you bring.
The other red light apparates outward and kind of stops right behind you. All the color in the space around you just goes to a desaturated black and white. That's going to finish its turn. That brings us to Laudna.
All right. 2 Eldritch Blasts, listening to Prism.
As the impact, you can see the shadow being brushed off, and you see the edges of the arms of the humanoid being that is currently encased within, briefly exposed before it forms back over them greedily. All right, Ashton, you're up with Denise on deck. After the heavy hit that you gave it last turn and the strange like pulling effect that you left on it,
Barely a hit, but
it's going to glare at you for a bit and grin, and its eyes flare. You feel your knees buckle at the sight of it, and you every impulse in your body tells you to run away. It's your turn.
I'm going to turn around and take a shot at the little red orb.
Which, as you swing that around and slam into it, it shatters into hundreds of pieces, almost like a glass sphere that just blasts into thousands of chunks of shattered crystal, and they all dissipate into red mist and vanish. All right, end of your turn. It's going to use its last legendary action to shadow spear you directly in front of it. Releases this like corkscrew point of an arrowhead that's formed of the shadow within. It kind of appears just for a moment in your direction. It smiles at you before it just darts off. You try and put the shield up, but it glides off the shield in and catches your shoulder, and you are pushed back, and it pins you to the wall. And it now stays in your shoulder, and you can't move from the stone. Orym, you're up with Prism on deck.
Smarter, not harder. And he spins the blade, and then I cut the air twice, pinned to the wall.
Gotcha.
Does it work?
Okay, so as the two blades cut through, it blasts back and kind of exposes part of the interior of the shadow, and you can see like the chest and part of the shoulder of a humanoid within.
I stick out the blade, and a grasping vine
Come on.
shoots out of it and inside, and I'm reaching to grab. I'm playing the claw machine.
You go ahead and release the vine from your blade into the section. You see it adheres and wraps around the shoulder. The body gets pulled out of the shadow. You hear the shrill shrieking of Evithorir. Just. It is now the entity's turn. It's just now kind of like looming up on top of the platform, looking down at the body, and you see the shadow, like tendrils of it reaching off and almost like reaching out for the unconscious humanoid on the ground, and is going to release this like small, actually it's not pretty small, it's a pretty thick black shadowed hand that puts an arm out there, and this little bead of light fires outward.
Counterspell.
Counterspell? All right. It's going to use its reaction to counterspell your counterspell. As the beam of light shoots outward and
I don't want no fireballs up in this bitch.
and as it stands there angrily, the mask pulls inside the shadow. The face kind of pulls inside. Laudna, you're up. Okay.
So I'm going to once again slam my hand into the ground, and you see like a skeletal hand rise. And I'm gonna grab him, just like head bash him.
Okay. The chill touch strikes, and the ice continues to pervasively spread throughout the shadow.
And then
you get a sense it's made an impact on its healing capability.
I look at him, and in Shadow Cant, I say, "Game recognizes game."
Yeah, baby.
In the black sphere there, the face emerges from the shadow once more to meet your gaze, but just the tip of it. And it goes,
Game recognizes game.
End of your turn. It's going to go ahead and use some secondary actions. Appears next to the figure, and the shadows begin to reach out and try and grab, and you can see like it's wrapping around parts of its arms as the unconscious figure lays there, begins pulling it across the stone in its direction. Ashton, you're up with Denise on deck.
I'm going to
Undo my little
pick up the body,
Okay.
and I'm going to book back towards everybody else.
Okay.
Full speed.
Angrily, it opens its mouth. In the center of its jaws, another spark of light energy swirls, firing out in this direction. 35 points of fire damage to you. To you, Denise.
14.
Ouch.
35 points of fire damage to you. Ashton, 17 points.
I'm also going to use the Ring of Volcanic Flesh and reduce that.
Take 8 points of fire damage and 35 points of fire damage.
Hi.
All right. That's going to finish its go. Laudna, you're up.
Got a
Eldritch Blast.
Alrighty. Now you see like the face, that weird like plasticine face is like cracking and pulling apart in places. The jaw is now like lowering itself deeper into the body. Parts of its cheekbones are like pulling apart. The face is almost expanding in a nightmarish way as it's beginning to tatter and look like it's about to discorporate. It's looking really rough.
I'll quicken Eldritch Blast.
As the last two hit it, you watch as they sink into it, and the black blob seems to lurch forward, like it's trying to crawl over the side, trying to escape, like a wounded creature that begins to skitter. As it begins to move, you watch as it leaves a trail of black liquid behind, and it just grows smaller and smaller in form as it slithers across the ground, making a horrible gasping sound. As it shrinks, leaving more and more threads of itself behind, they all kind of evaporate into a black mist until it's just a small-looking, feeble, blackened creature.
I extend my hand, my goopy hand, and I just suck it in and just squish it.
You squish it, and it all kind of like and it seeps into you, having taken the necrotic energy of this fallen moment into you.
Shadowy shadow.